You're watching the PoliticIt podcast.
Good evening. Welcome to Politic Podcast. I'm Senator John Johnson. We've got Kelvyn Cullimore with us today. You're head of BioUtah.
I am.
Let's talk a little bit about you to begin with, so our audience gets to know you a little bit better.
Well, that'll be a short conversation.
So, are you a Utah
Actually,
boy?
Grew up in Oklahoma. I think it's a great place to be from, and lived here since I graduated from Brigham Young University, and I've been a Utahn for most of my life.
So, Oklahoma. What part of Oklahoma?
Northeastern Oklahoma, a little town called Miami, Oklahoma. Yeah.
And you went to high school there.
Yes. Yeah, my grandfather, our family history is we're Utah pioneers, and my grandfather took the family out of Utah about 3 generations ago, and we ended up in Oklahoma, and my generation, we all came back. So we're all back here now.
Interesting. So BYU.
BYU.
And what did you study at BYU?
Financial planning.
Oh, financial planning.
Yeah.
Okay. How did you, so you went through BYU. When you graduated, what did you do?
My father had begun a business here in Utah, a business that acquired businesses from owners who did not have posterity to take over the business.
Oh, interesting.
And so we bought a few companies, and then we had some friends in Oklahoma who told us about a small company that was in the medical device business. We bought that and brought it out here, and then that became the main company, and that was a company named Dinatronics.
Dinatronics. And so you guys bought that company, and then you kind of stepped in,
Yes.
worked there, and that was a lot of your career.
Yeah, most of my career was at Dinatronics. I was the CEO for over 20 years. We took the company public. We did physical therapy products, electrotherapy, ultrasound devices, about anything you'd find. In fact, if you ever go to a physical therapist's office and there's not Dinatronics equipment there, I'd be questioning whether you should be there.
Whether you should be at that particular. Interesting. So what types of equipment are there then? What are the things you kind of specialize in?
We did the high-tech equipment like electrotherapy devices or ultrasound devices or traction devices. And we did the low-tech stuff like hot packs, cold packs, treatment tables, anything you'd find in a physical therapist's office.
So where did you move that company from coming to Utah?
It was just in someone's garage, really, to begin with. It was, and they were manufacturing a low-power laser device. That was our first product. And so we moved that from there out here. At the time,
where was there?
Kansas. It
Kansas.
was in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Okay.
Just over the Oklahoma line.
And you brought it here because this is where we
were all here now.
Okay.
Yeah. And at the time, we owned the Dunford Bakery, which was a name some people will recognize. And so we set this up in the back of the Dunford Bakery.
Oh, interesting.
That's where we started.
Yeah, that's where you bake this
Yes.
whole thing,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
And so I don't think a lot of people outside of that industry, I don't think they understand how central Utah is to a lot of what's happened with medical devices. And
That's really true, and the story is pretty exciting. Frankly, we are probably the 8th largest state in the production of medical devices in the country.
wow.
For a state of 3 million people, that's a big statement. And we employ, and the life science industry is broader than medical devices. It includes medical devices, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, and biotech of all kinds. And that industry in Utah generates $22 billion in GDP for the state.
Wow.
We employ 180,000 people in life science jobs. In fact, in Utah, there are only 2 states in the nation that have a higher percentage of their job force employed in life sciences than Utah, and that's New Jersey and Massachusetts.
Really?
So we are number 3 in employment density for life sciences. And on top of that, we are the 3rd fastest growing life science cluster in the United States, second only to Massachusetts and Arizona. And that's been the case for over a decade. So this is a very important industry to the state of Utah. We are a significant part of the economic engine here.
So you're CEO of Dinatronics. You got involved with the National Trade Association. Is that?
I was on the board of the National Medical Device Manufacturers Association for about 13 years, and we did a lot of lobbying in Washington, D.C. on behalf of the industry, fighting things like user fees and medical device tax and things of that nature. And I'm a big believer in what trade associations can accomplish.
And so did you go through the ranks then in the trade association nationally?
No, I was just on the board.
Okay.
And so I was just a board member, would go back and do lobbying and help to develop policy and things of that nature.
Okay, so you're CEO of Dinatronics, that's the name, right? And then you have an IPO, or how did this end up changing hands?
Well, we took the company public back in the late 80s to raise money to do clinical trials, and so ultimately I continued to be the CEO until 2018, and about 2016 we brought in some private equity, expanded the company, and sometimes when you bring in private equity and new management, things don't work out, and I chose that we chose mutually that it was time for a new CEO, so I left.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we when I was building my company, we always said that these venture capitalists, they couldn't form their own company, so they gave you a little bit of money so they could run your company, usually into the ground. But I mean, I hate to.
Yeah.
No.
Unfortunately, that's been the case since I left, so I'm disappointed. But yes.
Oh, interesting. So you exited, and then what did you do after that? Because you were CEO for a long time.
I was
building this company
from '92 to 2018. So that was a long term as CEO. When I left there, they were looking for someone to head up the local trade association for the state of Utah for life sciences. And that just seemed like the right mix for me with my background in politics and in life sciences. My wife says it was a job that was made for you to ride into retirement if that ever happens.
Oh, well, it's an interesting gig, and given that you were involved in politics a little bit, and kind of saw that side of it, and of course being on the board of the National Association, I guess that was a perfect fit for you.
Yeah, it's been a good fit. I've enjoyed it very much. Love being involved with the industry.
And so this is BioUtah, right?
Correct. The name of the trade association is BioUtah, and we represent the industry that is comprised of medical device manufacturers, pharmaceutical manufacturers, diagnostics, digital health, and anybody who supports that industry.
So the connection to biotech, what's the idea behind that? Is that just kind of the future of the medical device industry, or is that what they've been involved with all along?
Biotech is kind of one of those buzzwords that people use because it's kind of like you're combining biology with technology, and we have that virtually in every aspect of life sciences now, whether it's devices or drugs or diagnostics. They're all biotech in that sense.
But that ties the physical devices to medicine and other things, right?
And AI and all of that gets tied in. Anything that's tech and biology combined is considered biotech.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about this organization. Where does the funding come from? What's the primary purpose of this organization, and what are you trying to?
We are the flag bearer for the life science industry in the state, meaning that we advocate both at the federal level and at the state level. We work with people like you on Capitol Hill to make you aware of the issues that affect our industry, helping people understand what an important part of the economic engine we are in Utah, so that we can make sure that the laws and regulations that are passed are done in a way that are consistent with our goals to build the industry. We do economic development. We work closely with the state on economic development in this arena. We do a lot of networking. We connect both government, media, academia, and industry. So we kind of are that hub where they all come in and say if they want connections within life sciences, we become that hub that connects everybody.
And so you've really provide this government relations it's not just lobbying, right? It's
Correct.
relating to the government and
Thank you for clarifying that. You're right. It is more than just lobbying. It's also working hand in hand with government in achieving economic development goals and in addressing things like the pandemic. When that came around, we were involved with the state in helping provide supplies and PPE and things like that for the pandemic.
So what's your role with the federal delegation?
Pretty much the same thing. We want them to be aware of policies and procedures that affect us. In fact, we'll talk a little bit about one of those policies hopefully in a minute, because laws that are passed at the federal level affect our industry very dramatically.
Well, there's this big move in Utah now, this federalism initiative to really, it's kind of interesting. It's called federalism, right?
Right.
Which makes you think of federal government, right? But it's really this play between the national government and the local governments. And
right.
Going back to the 10th Amendment, we're basically saying, hey, if the role of federal government is constrained, right? It's enumerated powers that they have, and all other things should belong to the states. And that's a big push, I know, in the legislature, but I can see how it would affect, so many things. I mean, with the Commerce Act, federal government really took a lot of control over things that cross state lines, right? But so where do you see that going?
Well, from our industry's point of view, obviously it is regulated mostly at the federal level.
Right.
There's not a lot of state regulation of medical devices or drugs or things of that nature. It's almost all at the federal level. But there are state regulations that can either encourage or discourage the manufacturing of such products or the distribution or use of such products. So there is a role to play at the state level, but as you point out, the Interstate Commerce Clause and all of that tends to put most of our products at the federal government level for regulation.
Right. Well, we're going to take a break and we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay.
Tired of media bias? Frustrated by political noise? PoliticIt.com cuts through the clutter, giving you real facts, clear analysis, and unbiased insight on the issues that matter most. Stay informed, stay empowered. Whether it's elections, policy changes, or breaking news, we've got you covered. No spin, no agendas, just truth you can trust. Visit PoliticIt.com today, because informed citizens shape the future. PoliticIt.com, where politics meets clarity.
Welcome back to PoliticIt. We're here with Kelvyn Cullimore and BioUtah. Right before the break, we were talking about the kind of the regulatory framework for this, and why don't you talk a little bit about some of these regulations and how they're affecting the industry now?
Sure. Well, we are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. In fact, we talked earlier about my company, and the regulation of medical devices only began in 1976. We didn't know that devices were regulated when we started our company, and FDA actually shut us down at one point because we weren't following the rules. So it is very serious. They take very seriously their role of regulating our industry. The drug side has one set of rules, devices have another set of rules, biologics have another set of rules, so it's all very siloed in how we approach it. Right now, there's a lot of focus on pharmaceutical regulations and things that have been done in that.
And this gets into what we call this pill penalty, or
that's one of the things that we're dealing with right now. It was about 2 years ago in the Biden administration, they passed a bill that was called the Inflation Reduction Act. But the Inflation Reduction Act is a real misnomer because it doesn't really reduce inflation. But it did address several things associated with pharmaceuticals. And one of the things that it did is that it required companies that the government identified to come to the table to negotiate the price that they charge to Medicare. Well, the way they structured it, it's not a negotiation at all, because if they fail to come and negotiate, they have a 95% excise tax on their products.
Wow.
So it's not a negotiation. They take
that doesn't sound like an inflation reduction.
No. And they take these companies hostage, they come in and they tell them what the price is going to be. And that was touted as being a big savings that they were sticking it to pharma companies and saving a lot of money, but the real story is all they did is say, all this money that we aren't going to pay now out of Medicare, they moved over to pay for clean energy. So it didn't result in any savings to the patient.
It was just to grab this industry's doing well.
We're going to pay for our clean energy initiatives by taking money out of the Medicare side here, and so that was the idea behind it. And the way they set it up was, in spite of patents and patent protections, they said, if you manufacture a large molecule drug, you get 13 years before you're subject to negotiation. So you get a window of 13 years before we negotiate with you and reduce your price. Even if your patent is still live, we get to reduce your price.
Okay.
If you're a small molecule,
so what is a patent? How long does the patent normally?
It can go anywhere from 17 years to beyond that, and it's kind of tricky as to when it starts, because with drugs it's a little different than other products, and so it can go way beyond the 13 years that is there.
Okay.
And a large molecule drug is one that is administered intravenously. A small molecule drug is one that is a pill that you take. So for the pill side, the small molecule side, they said you only get 9 years. For the large molecules, we're going to give you 13 years.
And that's what we would call the pill penalty.
That is the pill penalty. And we're saying, why? Some believe that there was some misunderstanding that it costs more to develop a large molecule drug than a small molecule, so they're trying to give the large molecule more time to recover their costs. But in reality, that's not true. I mean, yes, there are large molecule drugs that cost more, but there are also small molecule drugs that cost more. And so it didn't make any sense to have this disparity. And so what has happened is, it turns out that if you're an investor, are you going to invest in something that's got a 9-year window for profitability or a 13-year window? And so it's taken money out of investment in the small molecule market and moved it over to the large molecule market, and it really needs to be evened.
And so what does that mean to patients?
Well, what it means is that the small molecule drugs, which are usually the less expensive drugs for the most part, and the ones that are easier to take, there's not going to be as many of those developed as there will be of the large molecule drugs, which are the more expensive and more difficult to administer drugs.
And these are ones that you would have to go to a hospital for, or?
Usually, or some sort of a center, or there are some that you can inject at home, but they're an injectable to do that. And so insulin, for instance, is a good example of that. But the small molecule drug, what we're asking for is that the bill be amended, this Inflation Reduction Act be amended so that it's 13 years for both, so that there's not a penalty for small molecules, so that we don't lose the investment in that side of the industry.
And have you actually saw the investment reduced in these in the pill market?
Absolutely. There are drug companies who have stopped their development of small molecule drugs because of the narrow window that has been imposed. Most people, I think, understand that to develop a drug of any kind, small molecule, large molecule, you're talking billions of dollars. This isn't an easy thing to do. It takes a decade and $1 billion to develop a drug, and not every drug that you develop is deliverable because it doesn't pass all the tests. So for every one that does get delivered, there's a lot that failed. And so if it's $1 billion and then you have 4 others that also you got $1 billion on, for the company to recover, it's a $5 billion investment just to get one drug to market. And so for the small molecule, it's really important that we have this equalized, because the cost to get these drugs to market is significant. And the companies, if they look at it and say, I've only got 9 years to recover my investments in that, that becomes very challenging for them to do. And if it's not a blockbuster drug, then what it does is it penalizes small populations, rare drug or rare disease patients, others who don't have the access to the kind of drugs that others would have.
Well, and you know, you think about rural communities too. It's much easier to send a pill to a rural community
absolutely.
than to do infusions, right?
Exactly.
So this limits the number of patients that it can affect and
Right.
the general well-being of everybody.
Right.
Okay, so what do we do? What does the general public do? What should people be aware of?
Well, they've probably seen flyers in their mail and things talking about the pill penalty, and now hopefully through this explanation it's more understandable about what we're talking about. But we're very fortunate. Senator John Curtis has signed on to what's called the EPIC Act. The EPIC Act is the statute that's been introduced to repeal that 9-year and make it a 13-year window, just like the large molecule drugs. Senator Curtis has signed on to that. We'd love to have our other elected officials in Washington sign on to it, so encourage them to do that. We're very fortunate President Trump just put out an executive order talking about how he was going to address issues in the pharmaceutical arena, and he also has this as one of his targets, is to get that equalized. So we've got President Trump supporting it, we've got Senator Curtis. We'd like to get a few more signing on so this bill can be a unanimous bipartisan bill to get through the Senate and the House.
So what's the status of that right now?
The EPIC bill has been introduced, and so it's accumulating sponsors. It will go through the regular process. It hasn't yet been through committee that I know of, and so it will go through committee and then go to the floor. I mean, just like any other bill.
So the general public could help at this stage just simply by contacting their representatives, right?
Yes.
And saying, we would like you to get on board with this.
Right.
Because what's the effect to the general public? This is going to lower the cost?
Several things. Number one, it will make more of the lower cost drugs available in the future because investment will be made in those products. The other thing is it will help us identify more cures, and it will keep costs down because of that. So yeah, that's the main thing. We don't want to lose the leadership role we have in the world on developing the pharmaceuticals, the small molecule pharmaceuticals.
So why is that important to people in Utah and your industry?
Because I don't know that you know anybody who isn't taking a pill for something, right?
Right.
And so everybody is impacted by the disease states and cures that this industry develops. And anything we can do to encourage the lower cost cures is a good thing.
Right. Very good. Thanks for coming in. We're about out of time. Any parting thoughts?
No, we appreciate this opportunity to talk about the issues that we face, and really appreciate you giving some visibility into how important this industry is in the state of Utah. We have pharmaceutical manufacturers here people may not even be aware of, and we have more on the way that are coming because Utah is such a great state.
Well, we appreciate your role with BioUtah and really kind of bringing this industry to light in the state. I know you do a lot of stuff in the Senate and the House here in the state, but this is a national issue that's important to Utah, isn't it?
It is.
So I'd encourage people to contact their representatives and actually make a pitch for why this is important for our state.
Senator, thank you very much for having me.
Nice to have you, and we'll see you guys next week.